without much ado, let me introduce you, Kosha. Kosha, firstly, so excited to have you here. Kosha has put in hours and hours of work in prepping for this presentation, in making slides, right from doing the entire survey. So she's been very interested and invested in this. So guys, so hopefully it will be a very, very insightful session for you all. So Kosha, welcome.
Thank you for the introduction on the platform. And I'm really excited to share my learnings and experience with everyone.
Glad to have you here, Kosha. So just a bit of background about Kosha. Kosha has a bachelor's in electronics and telecommunications from Mumbai. She got really interested, she says, in network computing in her third year and really got deep diving into courses, certifications, everything that she needs to kind of come to the US to do her master's in telecommunications, where she graduated from the University of Maryland, College Park. So she, like many of us on this call, has come here into the US with no prior experience, which means she was a fresher when she came here. Right now, she's working in the systems network domain, and I'll leave everything else for Kosha's introduction, but this is a little bit about herself. Here is the session outline. We'll talk a little bit about Kosha's journey as a fresher. She'll speak about how so many of us have similar profiles, right? But how do we kind of differentiate ourselves in terms of resume and other things in the job market? What was her attack plan? That's what she's going to share. And please remember that this is her experience. It worked for her. It might or might not work for you, but this is purely her experience, and none of these reflect opinions on her employers. And she's had a lot of interview experiences with Facebook, Apple, I think Tesla, a bunch of other companies. She had a bunch of rejections before finally ending up with her dream company in Google Cloud. So with that, I'm going to pass it on to Bhargavi, who's my co-facilitator for this evening. Over to you, Bhargavi.
Thank you, Apurva. Hi, Kosha. We're so excited to have you today. So before we jump into learning about Kosha's journey, we came across this really interesting statistic. So this is data collected from the National Association of Colleges and Employers, and it gives you like the average influence rating of some things you would have done to get your first professional job as a fresher. So as you can see, the top of the list is always has been you completing an internship with the same organization where you're applying for a full-time position. And the next in line, if you have internship experience in a similar industry. So these two things weigh the highest, more than like what your major is, what your work experience has been in general, or like you've held leadership positions in the past or extracurricular activities. So I know, Kosha, that you started your journey also with an internship. So can you walk us through your journey of finding that first internship and why that was useful?
Thanks, Bhargavi, for the introduction and questions. It was definitely a challenge coming to the US with no prior work experience and then competing directly in a pool of candidates who come with at least 1 or 2 years of work experience. But I would say that I took up a on-campus job, and that kind of helped me hone my soft skills a little bit, and then also pursued relevant courses and project work, which helped me create a strong profile. And then I started applications. In my opinion, I did start applications a little late, and that was because I feared that I was not ready to interview yet. Well, that was definitely a mistake, and I would recommend everyone to start early on, and every interview would just be a learning experience, and to not be afraid with that. Eventually, I did find a Python development internship at my university's internal research institute. So another tip would always be that be open to more non-conventional opportunities and see what comes your way.
Well, I'm really glad some of the opportunities within the campus really helped you. So you are in the networking and the cloud computing space. So what are some recommendations, strategic and otherwise, and some of the tools and platforms and technologies you would suggest people who are interested to get jobs in a space as you are in?
Right. So for this strategy, I would definitely recommend that people narrow down on where they actually want to be when they graduate, and or even if they're making a job switch, be mindful of where you want to be, and then definitely a good idea to do research on where the market is right now, what skills are required in the market, and what are the current trends, and then compare it with your skill set and just identify the gap and then just work on bridging the gap from there on. Of course, if you're in school, your courses and projects would help, but if you're not, you can always do hobby projects and you pick some freelancing gig and always add on to your GitHub profile if it goes in that direction. Talking about tools and platforms used in like infrastructure and networking domain, I would definitely suggest everyone to have their foundational skills really sound, like networking basics, including protocols and how sort of have an idea of how networking devices work, how the internet works in general, in details about DNS, HTTP, HTTPS, etc. And then also have some knowledge of system internals. Um, in general, you can pick any operating system course on platforms like Coursera. It's a good starting point if you have no background in, like networking or infrastructure. So once you have your basic sound, you can build on that with additional knowledge of microservices. Right now, the industry is moving towards microservice architecture. So it will definitely be a plus if you know what tools are used and how microservices kind of work and are implemented in production. An example of tools would be containers and container engines like Docker, Kubernetes, etc. Along with that, definitely have a scripting language in your pocket. Python goes a long way, but if you're proficient in other languages, that's good too. Um, so yeah, and definitely explore cloud platforms like AWS, GCP, or Azure if you are targeting those kind of roles.
Thank you, Kosha. This is like a very comprehensive list of technologies you have provided. So basically, a lot of students who are graduating from the same course and you've taken the same courses, the same kind of projects, how do you differentiate your profile?
That's a really good question and something that everyone faces. What I did for my job hunt was that I tried to position my profile more holistically. For example, like I wanted to be someone who could um, troubleshoot well, but also could write code when required. So I kind of picked up skills like Python, Bash, and then had sound understanding of network protocols and operating systems and stuff like that. And then I presented the combination to the recruiter, which was um, appealing. So the way I did it was to pick courses like data structures, distributed systems, cloud computing, and then advanced network protocols and um, things along those lines. Other than that, I would also recommend having hands-on experience, like you pick hobby projects. Make sure that those are not the projects that are mandated in your coursework. They're different from your batchmates. And then there's a tip here that you can always use student tier or free tier resources available on these cloud platforms if you're looking to do a hobby project on one of these cloud platforms. Yeah, and then other than that, we had sort of a capstone project in our university for a few credits, and then I picked a very relevant topic to relevant to the current trends, which is virtualization and cloud domain, and kind of deep dived in there, which also added to my profile, and all of these combined are really good talking points during the interviews.
I think these are a really good set of recommendations, but the most interesting one I find is, how you're able to access GCP and AWS with no charge. So I'm guessing this is a tip which a lot of students here attending would find a lot of value, that AWS and GCP, you could just go and play around without paying. And that's going to make a lot of difference in your job application. So you took the right courses, you were prepared with your hobby projects. So what was your job search attack plan?
Right. So I was mainly targeting roles within infrastructure, but I also had in mind that I should apply for software developer roles, not because I really wanted to pursue them, but all of those interviews would act as practice interviews for coding rounds in the roles that I really wanted. So going forward of that, I had two versions of my resume ready to go, and then I would customize my resume to match the minimum requirements, at least on the job description. And then I created alerts, of course, on platforms like LinkedIn, but also on my university's career portals, and then smaller and niche career portals like Built-in NYC, Built-in SF, AngelList, etc. And then if an alert would come out of these like smaller or niche job portals, I would immediately apply. And then for bigger companies, I would try to get referrals from friends or alumni or seniors. I think referrals definitely go a long way in bigger companies just because number of applicants are really huge. Apart from all of that, I believe that it is better to maintain a list where you track all your applications. And for me, what worked was to maintain status of the application, point of contact if there was one, and then after the first phone screening or something, if they're looking for a specific set of skills, I would just make a note of that to be able to better prepare for the next coming rounds. A good tip is that activate your LinkedIn Premium in your probably top 2 months of your job search. It goes a long way. You get unlimited emails, and once you do your applications, it's probably a good idea to reach out, a technical recruiter, a university recruiter of that company, and emails come in really handy. I also had my lead code premium on, and then I would practice based on the company and or attend few of meetups going around in DC area where I was at that point.
Thank you, Kosha. So Kosha was kind enough to share her resume with us. So you mentioned that you were applying to two different kinds of roles. You were interested in software development as well as cloud-based roles. So how was your resume different for both these roles?
The trick I used was kind of to reorder things, just because my profile is one, and whatever I have done is whatever I have done. But how do I structure it to present it to a cloud role or a software development role? So I reordered my projects, technical skills, and courses based on the domain I wanted to be in. So for my cloud CV, my first one or two projects would be everything on cloud, like exploring AWS, OpenStack, and so on and so forth. Whereas for a software development role, my first 3 or 4 projects would be everything coding, displaying my strengths in C, Bash, or Python.
That's a really good tip. I think pushing your experience, which is most relevant to the job you're applying for, is really important. So for software development, you really need to push your skills where you're showing your aptitude in data structures and algorithms and things like that. And one interesting thing Kosha did was actually track her applications. I feel like this is really meticulous. So do you want to walk through how you were tracking applications, Kosha?
Sure. So I started with tracking the application per se. So I would list down the company, position, job details, and the location, and update the status as and when I go through the interview process. This came in handy, but then I also felt there was a need for me to kind of keep track of where I want to apply next, and or where to go from. previous rejections. So I started maintaining two other lists, which were like list of companies and or list of people. And this information I would probably randomly gather just by networking with other people, or if I'm at an event and someone mentions something, I just come home and make a note of it in these lists. And then there's something called as a follow-up date column. I would always make sure that I follow up with the person I have previously reached out to, either on LinkedIn or via email. And I think that's a good habit to build.
Yeah, I think this is really, really well maintained and it's very useful. I mean, I can see a lot of value when you're like chaotically applying to so many applications and you need to track it better. So looks like you did go through a fair like number of rejections. So you interviewed with so many companies. What was your experience and what did you learn from some of your past experiences?
From these past interview experiences, I have like kind of classified three interview rounds listed here. So it would be like a coding round or a system design round. Second type of interview round would be a technical task or a homework, and then third type would be a troubleshooting interview. So going into the coding round, the way I would prepare is if it's a big company, Lead Code Premium has this really good feature where they have a collected set of questions for that particular company. Just by solving some of those questions, it gives you kind of good confidence just going into the interview. And then it works as a sanity check because you have worked on some of the problems asked to previous interviewees by that company, so it kind of breaks the glass. And then I would go through Glassdoor question answers to see if there were any tricks for the upcoming interview already posted by past interviewees. Going into the coding round, I found that for infrastructure network domain, the coding rounds questions basically can focus on anything ranging from data structures to like network or system programming. It's a good thing to have good knowledge of OSI libraries and or socket programming and parsing text files in your preferred language. And then most coding rounds are language agnostic. So either the recruiter will establish beforehand, or going into the interview, you would be given a choice, as most of you would know, as to which language you would want to use for that interview. Going on to technical tasks and or homeworks. These are tasks given for you to do over a period of time, probably a week. Um, and some of these could be really like tiring or strenuous. So I found that just quickly Google searching, you might find someone's GitHub already has this project, and you can use some of these projects as a good starting point and or a good comparison of where you have to be and what you have to submit. And it could act as a great time saver because you might be interviewing at other places and you can't dedicate like an entire week just to one company. And then talking about the last kind of interviews, the troubleshooting interview. Troubleshooting interviews are really interesting because these are scenario-based troubleshooting questions where interviewer will dig deeper and or ask as many follow-up questions as they can until you either find the root cause or you just hit a roadblock. They are trying to test the breadth and the depth of your knowledge and thinking ability. Good to have here would be knowledge of Linux or in general command line utilities used to troubleshoot network issues or application issues and performance issues. Right. And yeah, some of the platforms that I have used in these interviews are Google Docs, literally a wall, and also like HackerRank or CoderPad or something.
So you mentioned in your coding round that it's very language agnostic. What about like syntax? Do interviewers require you to produce like a running code, especially when you're asked to parse text files, for example?
Depends on the role and the company. Some roles at some companies require you to produce a running code, which is why practice comes in really handy. But interviewers kind of understand that syntax is really not the most important thing about a coding interview. So if you're stuck at some library that you're not aware of, you can always just like talk to the recruiter about it, and then some of them are really helpful, and they would just tell you either to either to look at it, or look at the documentation, and or just hint you or nudge you in the right direction.
This is a lot of valuable information, Kosha. Thank you so much for sharing this.